For over a decade, the world thought it knew how Michael Jackson died. Painkillers, scandal, maybe even foul play. But now, shocking new evidence is turning everything upside down. Judge Joe Brown just exposed disturbing truths about Jackson's physical condition, while unsealed FBI files paint a very different picture of the King of Pop's final years. What if Michael wasn't guilty, but a victim? What if the real story was hidden in plain sight this whole time? Michael Jackson's death was a global shock, but it turns out the full story was far more complex than anyone knew. Now, more than a decade later, explosive new details are emerging that don't just rewrite the narrative, they completely upend it. From controversial claims made by Judge Joe Brown to shocking revelations buried deep in FBI files, the truth about Jackson's final days, and the celebrities connected to his tragic ending, is more twisted and revealing than ever. Let's dive into the wildest new findings that prove Michael Jackson wasn't just misunderstood. He may have been deeply wronged. Judge Joe Brown reveals Jackson's body was falling apart. Judge Joe Brown, known for his legal insights and blunt honesty, didn't hold back in a recent interview with The Art of Dialogue. What he shared about Michael Jackson's health and private suffering has left people speechless. According to Brown, Jackson wasn't murdered in a sinister plot. He was slowly destroyed by years of unimaginable physical pain. Brown described how Jackson endured repeated scalp surgeries, possibly every few months, to treat the injury sustained from burns and medical complications. Brown also made a shocking claim. Michael had no nose at one point. The nose we saw in public appearances? A prosthetic taped to his face. This wasn't about vanity. It was about survival. Jackson had bone implants in his face and ongoing procedures just to function. He was falling apart physically and emotionally, relying on powerful painkillers just to get through the day. It wasn't addiction in the typical sense. It was desperation. Neverland's bodyguards sound the alarm. Brown didn't stop at Jackson's medical issues. He also spoke about the unsettling environment at Neverland Ranch. According to him, multiple bodyguards refused to return after witnessing disturbing scenes. Brown implied that it wasn't Jackson who disturbed them, but the behavior of some of the guests. Specifically, he claimed that some mothers brought their sons to Neverland, fully aware of the rumors and controversy, hoping to use their children to gain access or fame. And these claims add a dark layer to the already messy narrative around Neverland. Jackson may have been isolated, surrounded by opportunists, and exploited by the very people who claimed to care. Prince and Michael, the tragic connection. In a powerful and unexpected comparison, Brown drew a parallel between Jackson and another fallen icon, Prince. Both megastars lived with chronic pain. Both endured the pressure to maintain perfection. Both relied on powerful medication to deal with their physical and emotional torment. Brown suggested their deaths were a form of socially acceptable suicide. Not planned, but not accidental either. When life becomes unbearable and painkillers become the only escape, the line between treatment and self-destruction blurs. The music world didn't just lose two legends, it lost two deeply broken human beings whose pain was silenced by their fame. The FBI watched Michael for 20 years and found nothing. In 2009, after Michael Jackson's death, the FBI unsealed over 600 pages of documents covering a 20-year investigation into Jackson's life. What did they find? Nothing illegal, no child pornography, no criminal behavior, no credible patterns of abuse. Despite decades of rumors, lawsuits, and media spin, the actual government files cleared Jackson. He was monitored, followed, and investigated, and he came up clean. That's not a theory, that's fact, backed by official documentation. Jackson wasn't protected by power, he was stalked by it. And still, no proof of wrongdoing ever surfaced. Jordan Chandler's lie exposed by autopsy. One of the most damning pieces of evidence in the 1993 case came from accuser Jordan Chandler, who claimed Jackson was circumcised. But after Jackson's death, the autopsy report revealed he wasn't. That detail completely undermined the credibility of Chandler's entire claim. If he had truly seen what he said he did, that mistake wouldn't have been possible. But again, the truth came too late. Jackson had already paid a massive settlement, not as an admission of guilt, but to avoid dragging the case through court. Still, the public had made up its mind. Even when proven false, the damage was done. The 2005 trial: lies, manipulation, and full acquittal. By 2005, Jackson was back in court, facing fresh accusations. But this time, the truth got a little more light. The accuser's family was revealed to have a history of false claims and lawsuits, including attempts to extort other celebrities like George Lopez. Under intense legal scrutiny, their story began to fall apart. Jackson was ultimately acquitted on all charges. The jury didn't just find him not guilty, they found the case deeply flawed. But even victory in court couldn't clear his name in the eyes of a media that had already sold a villain narrative. Leaving Neverland crumbles under scrutiny. In 2019, Leaving Neverland revived Jackson's abuse allegations through interviews with Wade Robson and James Safechuck. But soon, their claims fell apart. Safechuck alleged abuse in a train station that, based on official construction records, didn't exist at the time he said it happened. Robson, meanwhile, had testified under oath in previous years that Jackson never touched him, then changed his story after being turned down for a role in a Jackson tribute project. Despite these facts, the documentary went viral, damaging Jackson's legacy all over again. But behind the dramatic editing and emotional storytelling, the truth didn't match the timeline. So, who's really to blame for Michael's death? At this point, the picture is painfully clear. Michael Jackson was monitored for decades by law enforcement with no criminal findings, slandered by media that prioritized ratings over truth, exploited by people who wanted access, attention, or payouts, failed by doctors who enabled his dependency rather than intervening, abandoned by the industry he helped build. His story isn't one of guilt, it's one of suffering. Jackson died not because of scandal, but because no one helped him heal. He was a man in pain, surrounded by silence, lies, and manipulation. Final thoughts. A legacy that deserves the truth. Michael Jackson was many things: a genius, a performer, a perfectionist, and a global icon. But above all, he was a human being, flawed, fragile, and ultimately broken by the very world that crowned him King of Pop. The recent findings from Judge Joe Brown and the unsealed FBI documents don't just clean his name, they demand a cultural reckoning. For too long, we believed headlines over evidence. We let gossip drown out truth. It's time to do what the courts did, what the documents prove, what the facts show. It's time to let the truth speak louder than the scandal.